What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the neighborhood. My name is Dylan Wren, and today I am bringing you a quick little review of The Sinking City. I finished this game not that long ago and had a lot of fun with it. It's developed by Frogwares, which are probably most well known for their Adventures of Sherlock Holmes series. It's inspired by the works of H.P. Lovecraft and other cosmic horror authors. And in this game, you play as Charles Reed, a private investigator who has been drawn to the town of Oakmont, Massachusetts, in search of answers about visions that he has been having. The town has recently been hit by a natural disaster, leaving much of it flooded and kind of cut off from the rest of the sort of state, the nation. It was already a very remote town, but this has made it even more so. And so along the way, as you're playing the game, you're exploring an open world, meeting an interesting cast of characters, and putting your investigative skills to use. And you can really see the ties to the Adventures of Sherlock Holmes series in a lot of the investigating that you do in this game. So with that, we're going to do this like our normal reviews. And so first I'm going to jump into some things that I like about the game. Then I'm going to talk about a few things that I maybe wish were a little bit different or that I didn't quite enjoy as much. And then I'll give it sort of my rating. So I really liked the atmosphere of this game. I feel like it really captured the otherworldly feel of cosmic horror very well. I think there was a lot of just like, it was set in a world that is somewhat familiar. It's set in like the 1920s. So, you know, obviously not super familiar to us. We haven't lived there, but you're seeing normal things that you would expect to see for that period. But then everything just feels just a little bit off. There's just a little bit of weirdness. And I feel like that captured that cosmic horror vibe very well. There are also a lot of just weird things in this game. So if you've read some Lovecraft, they have the town of Innsmouth, and so in this game they have a bunch of people who are from the town of Innsmouth that they call Innsmouthers, who have sort of the deep one fish-like features that they are described as having in, you know, the works of Lovecraft, and no one really, comments on that. Is just kind of a natural thing in this game. And so there's a lot of little things like that where you go in and no one around you seems to be off-put or even notice a lot of these things that are going on. But I think it does a good job of contributing to the weirdness and to just kind of that uneasy feeling that you can sometimes get in sort of that familiar but weird vibe. I also really liked the investigations. I think this is obviously a strong suit of this developer because that is kind of their main thing that they are known for is their investigative games. And I think they did a really good job of bringing that in as you play through and are the private investigator. So you constantly along the way of this game, you are meeting people who have something going on, have an issue, need you to find somebody, have questions, and so you put your investigative skills to use. So I loved getting to go around and explore the world, looking for clues, and then you have a sort of mind palace thing that they brought over from Sherlock Holmes, and you kind of piece all these clues that you've been finding together and come up with your conclusions. So I hadn't played any of the Sherlock Holmes games before this, and so this ended up being a whole lot more in-depth than I was expecting it to have been, just because I wasn't super familiar with that. A lot of the other games that are kind of in this cosmic horror genre that I had played before this had investigation, but it is more of a light investigation, I feel like. And so this was actually way more in depth. This is what I would say is probably the main part of the game, is these investigations. And so as you're investigating, frequently you'll hit a point where you'll kind of have to figure out what you're supposed to do next. And so you have to do a little bit of research. And so they've got a library, they've got a police station, they've got the hospital, they've got a sanitarium. And so you'll have to figure out where I need to go. And so you may be like, oh, okay, I need to figure out there was a fire or a murder or something that went on. And so do I need to go to the police station and try to look up, various murders that happened in this time period and see if I can't figure out, a location that I might need to investigate next? Or you might dig through the old newspaper archives to find an article written about a particular person you're trying to track down, so you can see maybe where you might go look for them. And so I felt like that was really cool, because it wasn't just like holding your hand, putting a waypoint on the map. It was kind of like, hey, like you need to go investigate this, and then it's going to give you 2 streets. It's like at the corner of this street and that street. And so you'll have to like dig out your map and figure out like, oh, okay, where is this? And you'll have to put the marker there yourself and then go find it. And so that felt really cool. It felt like you were doing stuff. It felt like you were investigating, and so I thought they really nailed that investigative portion of it. And that kind of ties into the story too. So already I'm a sucker for cosmic horror stories, and anyone, investigating secret kind of occult societies, uncovering vast conspiracies. Like, I love that stuff. It's right up my alley. And that is what this game is. And so as you're investigating, as you're solving these mysteries, you'll frequently at the end of that kind of wind up with like, okay, I've put all the pieces together, and I can interpret this in like 2 or 3 different ways. And so, the first case, somebody's looking for their missing son, and it turns out their missing son was murdered. And you find all of these clues, and you can interpret it as like, okay, this murder was committed, with ill intent, and this person knew what they were doing and meant to kill this person. And then you can also put the clues together in a way that's like, there was something unnatural going on here, and that influenced this person. They weren't in control of themselves. They were being driven mad, and they had no knowledge of what they were doing. And that kind of leaves you with this choice that I think is very interesting. Just because neither of those choices really feel like good ones, of like, okay, so this person intentionally murdered this person, and they are telling me, because you're talking to the guy who did it, they're telling me how I didn't mean to, I was driven insane, and you really can't tell. And so you kind of have to make the call based on what you know about this world. And the more that you kind of get in there and understand the world, the more that you kind of start to question, like, am I making the right decision? What is going on? And I think that does a good job of drawing you into the world and the character, because they're just kind of as lost and new to all of this as you are. And I think it does a great job of kind of giving you those, it's most of the solutions are not going to be happily ever after solutions. Most of the time it's like, what is the least bad of these 2 options? And based on what I know about the world, here's the thing that I'm going to do. And so I think there's a lot of interesting things that made me stop and think and kind of weigh my choices a bunch as I was playing through this game. And the story, I think, does a good job of throwing in a bunch of little references to things. If you've read, Lovecraft or other cosmic horror authors, I think it does a good job of throwing in these little references that you'll catch and think are pretty cool. And that kind of ties into the ending of the game. I won't spoil it, but it does give you some choices at the end, and it feels very much in line with cosmic horror works that inspired it. And so if you like cosmic horror and you like this kind of genre, I think you'll probably like the ending and be satisfied with the ending. If you're looking for a power fantasy, you may not enjoy the ending, but I personally thought it tied everything together and was very much in line with everything that I've ever read in the cosmic horror genre. I'll transition into a few things that I didn't like about the game or just kind of wish were a little bit different. There is combat in this game, but it's not the greatest. It's not terrible, but I didn't have a ton of fun with the combat. I pretty much tended to avoid it early on just because you don't really have anything powerful to fight these things with, because most of what you were fighting is going to be these wild beasts, these sort of horrors that are attacking you, and some of them can be pretty tanky. And so at the start of the game, all you have is a melee weapon and a pistol, and so you're not really going to have a good time fighting those things at the start. But also, it is a kind of survival horror-y type of feel because you do have very limited resources. You don't have a ton of ammo. The town, since it's flooded, has gone back to bartering, and the currency of the town is bullets, and so it does a good job of making that resource scarce enough that you think every time that you might get into some combat. And so eventually down the road, you'll have enough points to kind of upgrade everything and make combat less of an annoyance, make resources less limited. You'll get some better weapons that make the combat a little bit more fun. But it's definitely not something that I would come to this game looking for or expecting. If you're coming for just combat, if the investigation doesn't interest you, you're probably not going to have a fun time with this game. Like I said, it wasn't the worst, it wasn't terrible, but I wasn't the biggest fan. And it's not required most of the time. You will occasionally run into some stuff that makes you fight it, but a lot of the time you can kind of just run past or run away or avoid areas of the map where you might have to do some fighting. Another part that I wasn't a huge fan of were the diving sections. Charles Reed is a Navy diver, and so they incorporate that into the game pretty frequently. It's not super often, but there, every kind of big mission, there's usually a diving portion of it. And the diving portion does have some cool visuals. I did like that part of it, but just it felt tedious to kind of walk slowly underwater. And there are occasional enemies that you can't kill. You can just kind of scare off, but it kind of felt janky to me. Thankfully, like I said, these don't happen super frequently, just kind of in big missions. And they tend to be pretty short, so it's kind of just like a walk from point A to point B with some light sort of platforming things. So it's not the worst thing in the world, but I, wasn't the biggest fan of those sections. And then just in general, getting around the open world can sometimes be a little bit of a hassle. The city, like I said, was flooded, and so a lot of the time you can't just walk from point A to point B. You have to find a boat and go up some of the alleys, kind of like Venice, where you're having to go up flooded streets in the boat. The map is sometimes a little unclear of what's accessible from where, and how you need to go from point A to point B. And there are not a ton of fast travel locations, so sometimes you're like, okay, I have to go to the corner of road X and road Y, and you'll warp to what you feel like is the closest location to that, and then you'll walk around and you'll find this big wall that's kind of just in the way that doesn't let you pass. Or you get there and there's this sort of danger area where there are a bunch of enemies and you don't really feel like fighting them, and so You either have to run through them and hope you just don't die, or take a wide detour around it. And so it wasn't terrible. I think it does contribute to the world, but sometimes, in some of the missions where it was sending you kind of all across the map, it could get a little bit annoying. And then the last thing that kind of sucks that I wish was different is just there's some publisher woes. So allegedly Nacon / Big Ben Interactive, the people who originally published this game, kind of screwed over the developer Frogwares. And so for a while there, the game was sort of delisted from a bunch of digital storefronts. It is back up now, and so if you are interested in checking out this game, I'd encourage you to check the developer and just make sure, or the publisher, and make sure that it's listed as Frogwares. And if you're interested in learning more about kind of all that drama, I'd encourage you to go look up those details, because I don't have the knowledge or the time to kind of dive super deep into that, but all of that to say, Frogwares has put the game back up with them as the publisher. And so if you want to check it out and support them, see if you can't get it from them as the publisher. But that kind of brings us to the verdict. And so overall, I really like this game. Personally, I would rate it at an A for me. Keep in mind, I am pretty much the target audience, for this game. Everything in this is kind of like a check mark for things that I am interested in and like. If you're not into cosmic horror, investigation, exploration games, this game may not be as high for you. But I personally loved the world. I loved investigating the various mysteries. The story felt straight out of cosmic horror fiction that I really enjoy. It frequently made me stop and think about my options and weigh my decisions, and a lot of the sort of choices that it makes you make in this game I thought were very interesting, and still ones that I'm like, I wonder what would have happened if I had made that other choice. Though the combat wasn't the best, it usually isn't required, and once you solve a few cases, which is what the game is mainly about, resources become a lot less scarce, and you have way more options for dealing with the combat. And so overall, I really enjoyed my time with it. I'd love to see more games like this that tackle sort of the cosmic horror, because I don't think a lot of the games that are inspired by cosmic horror works really capture the feel and the vibe of those works. And so if you're into cosmic horror, if you're into investigation games, check this one out. I think it's really good. And so with that, hopefully you found this helpful. If you did, we'd appreciate you liking, subscribing to us. If you have played this game, if you've enjoyed it, or you have questions or comments, feel free to leave those for us on this video. If you want to hear more from us, check out our podcast, Your Friendly Neighborhood Gamers, where myself and my co-host Andrew Kimball, who hasn't played this game, we talk about other things, talk about other games, talk with other creators. So you can find that wherever you find podcasts. We also stream on Twitch weekly at 7:30 on Fridays at neighborhood_gamers. And so come out and see us if you enjoyed our little conversation, our review. And so with that, I will leave you guys with a reminder to stay friendly, gamers.